Welcome to the CBIA BizCast. I'm your host, Ali Warshavsky, and today on our podcast, we have the newly elected Mayor of East Hartford, Mayor Mike Walsh. He's joining us today to talk about some of his campaign, what he campaigned on, and what he hopes for the future of businesses in East Hartford and the overall economic development. So welcome to the podcast, Mayor Walsh.
Ali, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
First, let's start about your background and, how long you've been in the town. I know you've been the director of finance for 23 years. So it seems like you might know a little bit about the ins and outs of City Hall in East Hartford.
Exactly. East Hartford is a town of about 50,000 residents. And Ali, you're right. I've been here as the finance director through 2019, and that was for 23 years. East Hartford has a $200 million budget, and you're right. From the inside, I saw the administration of the budget, from the school system to public works to police to fire. Worked for three mayors, initially brought out of private industry. I was with the Cigna Insurance Company, where they taught me about medical insurance and utilization, by Mayor Tim Larson back in 1997. Ultimately, Tim went back to the state, first as a state representative, then as a state senator. I was retained by Melody Curry. Melody then, she had left state service. She was actually the deputy speaker of the House, left state service only to be called back by Donnell Malloy, Governor Malloy, first to the Motor Vehicle Department and then to the Department of Administrative Services. So I served a second term of about 6 years under Melody Curry. And then Marcia LeClaire, when Melody left, assumed the mantle, so to speak, of Mayor of East Hartford. Marcia stepped down after 11 years. I left the town of East Hartford as its finance director in 2019, took a job as an undersecretary at the Office of Policy and Management, which is sometimes called the Governor's Budget Office. Did not know this thing called COVID-19 would hit not only the nation, but the entire world. So Governor Lamont did, in my opinion, some phenomenal work keeping the state one of the safest, with a campaign that started in late March of 2020, Stay Home, Stay Safe. Of course, we had masking and, we did things. I was moved on March 30th of 2020 from 450 Capitol Avenue, where my office was, to the Emergency Operations Center, which is in the basement of the Armory, right over there across from the Legislative Office Building. We did things in April, and it certainly wasn't me. I had the pleasure in a bad situation to watch this. The National Guard, 1,400 of them, called onto duty, federal orders, and they created literally 10,000 additional beds to supplement the 8,800 we had. That was about the time New York City was on fire with COVID-19. We were out of ventilators, we were out of PPE. So April was setting up hospital beds. May was inspecting nursing homes. June was securing scarce PPE nationwide to the tune of about $350 million. Then we started to create a test to figure out who had COVID and how to, what they call contract trace. Over the summer, we set up testing sites across the state of Connecticut. And it was as early as August that we thought we would have a vaccination, probably in late December. So we set up the first mass vaccination site here in Rentschler Field. So my background as the finance director really came into play with respect to understanding who owned the Rentschler site, where we were doing testing, and how we can use the Rentschler site, the old airfield, to do a mass vaccination site. And the rest is history. We are starting to get COVID under control. We got a little bit of a hiccup with the Delta variant, and now I believe it's called the Omicron variant. So we're a little bit anxiously awaiting those. But that in a nutshell, Ali, is how I came back to the town of East Hartford after nearly a quarter century being here originally.
Well, yes, and I'm sure that working in the Office of Emergency Management prepares anyone to take on a leadership role and deal with some very stressful situations. So I'm sure not only working as, with the finance department, but just working in emergency management has probably prepared you for this role. And you said, obviously, you've been in town quite a few years. How have you seen East Hartford change over the years?
So I'm a guy who believes the glass is half full, not half empty. If you run into a couple of our Facebook feeds, for instance, there's about a half a dozen people that are angry out there today about the town coming through with a second round of leaf collection. You'd think doing an additional round of leaf collection is good, but they were a little bit put off because we told them we were only coming out once and they didn't have an opportunity to get their leaves out to the road. So that's an idea or a glimpse into the life of a mayor. It's really unceremoniously trying to deliver quality of life services to a population that on a day-to-day basis is just trying to live their life. So government, we're trying to be unassuming. We're trying to deliver a higher level of service, and we're trying to do it at a lower cost. All of those things have proven fairly difficult. But I think I'm going to kind of cut you off at the pass. Love to talk about development if you'd like to go there.
So you want to talk about how it is going to change instead of how it's changed over the past few years. And, even today in the news, I was actually reading that I believe tonight you guys are going to be talking about the town purchasing a plaza on Silver Lane, correct?
Yep. So, Ali, a little bit of background. So, one of the things I came back to East Hartford to do, using the skill set that I acquired over 25 years here, and then more so some of the leadership that I saw through COVID over at the state of Connecticut, starting with Governor Lamont, is to really focus on the things that are important for the community. Mm-hmm. And I have something that they call a control tower. It's a 25-page document with the top 25 priorities that East Hartford needs to pursue. The top one is the one you just mentioned, the Silver Lane Plaza. It is a blighted, very poorly maintained property. Was bought by a gentleman from New Jersey about 6 years ago from the Solar family. And the Solar family owned it for decades before. If you're a longtime East Hartford resident, you call this the JM Fields Plaza. In fact, it's the Silver Lane Plaza. It's virtually vacant. There are some month-to-month tenants like Bare Bones Boxing and, a dentist is over there and so forth. But at the end of the day, the community, through, knocking on doors and talking to literally hundreds, if not thousands of residents, has said loud and clear that that's an unacceptable condition for Silver Lane. So in my control tower, the first thing we look at is going after and securing Silver Lane Plaza. We are fortunate because our legislative delegation, led by Jason Rojas, Jeff Curry, and Henry Jenga, plus Saud Anwar out of South Windsor, who's our state senator, have secured bonding for East Hartford. So we actually have a pool of money that comes to us from the state where we can negotiate with that owner and say, listen, we have a different vision for our community. We have a different way forward. We'd like you to sell that to us at a reasonable price. We have an appraisal at about $4.6 million. So we have the money in hand. We have a pretty good idea what we should pay. Now we have a reluctant owner who's really not investing in the community, really not a part of the community, saying, well, wait a minute, I don't think I want to sell it to you. So that's the discussion we have to have with council. Should we use all the tools in our toolbox to really do what the community has said loud and clear that we should do? Improve the Silver Lane corridor and bring development to East Hartford.
Well, it's such an important corridor too, as someone who grew up right off of Silver Lane, and it's right near the entrance of Rentschler Field, and something that a lot of people see as they go to concerts, as they come back in football games. So I could see why some residents there, would want to see change there. What do you envision? Say that everything works out, you're able to purchase this plaza. What do you envision there in the future?
So some of it, there's two ways to approach the purchase of the Silver Lane Plaza. You're either playing offense or defense. In this particular case, we're playing defense. We have an announced development, Jasco Apartments, on what used to be called the Showcase Cinema site. Mm-hmm. It's an $81 million development. And we have a number of people in the community that are upset by that development for a couple of reasons. The local newspaper ran the headline that the town has sold it for $1. And that in fact is true. And if you left it right there, people could be angry. But if you understand that the value of the land represents an equity contribution that the town hands the owner, that the owner then uses to fund the rest of the $81 million project with a bank, you start to understand the financial components. The piece that I want to get out to the community that heretofore hasn't been gotten to the community is there's an 8.3% return on investment every year for 20 years when this apartment building goes up. It is high-end or luxury market rate apartments with what we call amenity-rich facilities, including a workout room and a pool. That's important to develop. Now back to Silver Lane Plaza when I say we're playing defense. If I had a number of tenants ready to go into the Silver Lane Plaza, that would be we would be buying it for a reason that I would call going on offense, growing the grand list. In this particular case, I'm going on defense. I need the town to acquire that property because it's in such a state of disrepair. The $81 million apartment complex may not happen if the people have to drive past that blighted property to say, I live in this $1,500 or $1,800 a month apartment. So our development is imperiled unless we clean up that particular property on Silver Lane first.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, so that's looking forward to the future of East Hartford right there. Some pretty big changes and decisions that have to be made. What are the state of businesses in East Hartford overall because of COVID? Are you guys starting to see them rebound and recover, or are you guys still trying to figure out how to recover from COVID? I know depending on the town, it's a different answer.
So that's a two-part question. And I'm first going to lead with some exciting news. A company called National Development has landed on Rentschler Field. Rentschler Field has been the famous airfield. Frederick Rentschler, back in the turn of the century, brought his airplane manufacturing company to East Hartford from Hartford. That grew into Pratt Whitney, and now Raytheon owns the airfield. Well, after 30 years of looking, we have National Development that has entered the picture. As COVID wanes, and we hope it's waning, we hope there's not a resurgence, but they have provided us with a sample of what we call ECommerce. And in some ways, that could be a warehouse, that could be whether it's a Lowe's, a Home Depot, a JCPenny, a PC Richards. We have supply chain issues, so a warehousing operation in East Hartford will serve both Boston and New York. We're a central point. Will provide about 2,000 good paying jobs, something that's a shot in the arm for the community. So here we are as COVID wanes, and we have perhaps the single most important, exciting development for Rentschler Field in 3 decades. So that's the good news. On the flip side of the coin, East Hartford, like every other community in the state of Connecticut, every other community in the United States of America, has been walloped pretty hard by COVID. Our restaurants in particular. We have 3 great restaurants. We have many great restaurants, but the 3 that I'll name are Roma's on Burnside Avenue, Savvy's on Main Street, and of course Carmine's more in the south end of town. And that's not to slight anybody else, but that's really to put a plug in. They have survived through the pandemic. And in the case of our restaurants on Main Street, Pratt Whitney, which is Raytheon, has announced that 75% of the workforce will probably be working remotely on a permanent basis. So a couple of things come into view. Number one, the landscape in East Hartford post-COVID, or as we wind down from COVID, looks dramatically different than pre-COVID. More importantly, Ali, and I'll throw in another piece of information. We have a $40 million private investment of fiber optics going in the tree belt up and down every road. We've got about 187 miles of road. And this will allow us, the town of East Hartford, to have a competitive advantage like none of the other 168 communities. This will give residents and businesses an alternative to either AT&T or even Comcast at speeds that are 15 to 20 times faster. They call it symmetrical, meaning it's up speed and down, upload speed and download speed will be at least 1 gigabyte, in some cases 10 gigabytes, and for commercial installations up to 400 gigabyte dark fiber. This puts East Hartford on the map. We become Silicon Valley of central Connecticut. We don't know what kind of businesses we will be able to attract, but we're one of the first communities that have signed a smart city agreement with sci-fi. So in the next 24 months, we look for that to be built out, and we look for that to attract a new type of incubator space here in East Hartford, one that is based on forward-thinking technology as opposed to the manufacturing of, to go circular with my initial reference to Frederick Rentschler and his aircraft manufacturing company coming to East Hartford nearly 100 years ago.
Yeah, so I know you're a glass half full guy, but it seems like you're just a little bit worried about the fact that people won't be coming back to the office at Pratt and Whitney because those were the ones going on the lunch break to Roma's, which big fan of when I was living in town.
Yeah, absolutely. We still don't know what the full effects of COVID are. We have received $24 million in what they call the ARPA funds, the American Recovery Plan Act. We've put those to good uses, both standing up employment programs, standing up some of the work that we couldn't do on the budget that we have with respect to, a little bit of the revenue we've lost. So we are retrofitting some buildings. East Hartford, as I said, I view myself more as the glass half full than half empty. We're coming back. I've lived here about 30 years. My kids were educated in the school system. There's plenty of things that East Hartford has to do to reinvent itself, but we've got a 25-point plan. We've got a control tower. We've got an engaged electorate, and we've got some pretty powerful folks up at the Capitol. So together we can do this. I sound a positive note, yet a cautious note. We've got fiber coming to East Hartford. We've got 360 market rate apartments. We're in the process of trying to negotiate a sale of Silver Lane Plaza. We've got ECommerce coming to Rentschler Field, and who knows what the possibilities are down the road. But as 2022 comes in a little more than or a little less than a month, I think East Hartford is a community to watch as we move forward.
Yeah, and you already touched on something I was going to ask you about, but that sale of the field. So it's going to go to ECommerce, to a facility where I'll probably be ordering a couple of things from, and they'll go there first. That's the plan for that.
Yeah, in as much as I would like to reinvent East Hartford and make us Blueback Square East with doctors' buildings and high-end luxury condos, really the empty airfield in the center of East Hartford lends itself best to e-commerce. That means probably 2 large warehouses to serve a number of different clients. And that means, again, my community will have first dibs on 2,000 good paying jobs.
Mhm.
Why that's important, Ali, is good paying jobs generally bring medical benefits and they bring some form of pension. That means our community is stabilized because generally speaking, those are jobs that will go to our residents, or they'll have an opportunity to secure those jobs. And by spending that money that they earn in their community, within their community, we can improve the school systems, improve the roads. It's an economic model that really will have a positive impact in East Hartford. So for those that view the glass half full and say, oh, darn, their warehouses, I encourage them to look at the glass half full. This brings stability. This brings per capita income. This brings 2,000 good jobs. And, 30 years ago, our many main streets were the shopping malls like Buckland kind of sucked the life out of them. Amazon is now sucking the life out of the malls. COVID certainly did not help that. E-commerce is the wave of the future. Fiber is the wave of the future. We've got a foot on each particular pulse. And as I said, as the clock turns to 2022, we're a community to keep an eye on.
And one of the things that Amanda and I were reading about recently was you want to make sure you're meeting with the stakeholders in the community, making sure you're in touch with Goodwin College, Pratt and Whitney. What do you envision through this partnership with stakeholders, or what is your plan? Have you had a meeting with some of them yet? Because you're right, Goodwin College and Pratt and Whitney are often 2 places people do think about right now when you think about the town East Hartford. Maybe in a couple of years, they'll be thinking more about the warehouses that are coming and that new apartment complex. But for now, those seem to be pretty big stakeholders in the community.
So the answer is COVID has caused some of our connective tissue with some of our most important stakeholders in the community to erode a little bit. Let's start there. So I knew that the job had to be done to reestablish that connective tissue because, we all live and breathe the same air and we should all be on the same page. So met with the legislative delegation, the three individuals, the Henry Jengas, the Jeff Currys, the Jason Rojas's, the Saud Anwars. We are now beginning to understand the common shared things that East Hartford has to do to move forward. I've already been out to Goodwin College. Mark Scheinberg is a visionary. And I said Goodwin College, I should say Goodwin University. Recently, they've bought Bridgeport University as well. So each day they expand under Mark's leadership. Already been out and had a preliminary discussion with Pratt Whitney from Raytheon Technologies. Have a number of different things where we want to talk to them about.
And, when people move to East Hartford now or living there, did they choose East Hartford because of the proximity to the insurance businesses in Hartford, or are they really working within the town at Pratt Whitney, at Goodwin College? And if not, is that something you want to see change? Do you want to develop a relationship where the people who are working at Pratt Whitney are living in the town, right across the street from the building?
This is actually circular. One of the questions you asked me is how the community has changed, and this is probably a good example to go back to that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was 48 years a machinist at Pratt Whitney. We lived
Mm-hmm.
in Wethersfield. And at the time, Pratt Whitney was running 3 shifts, 26,000 employees. And the bulk of those employees lived in East Hartford. We developed homes or built homes around World War II and into the 40s and 50s that housed the majority of workers. So there were specific areas of town that were built up to house Pratt Whitney workers. That's no longer the case. Those workers have aged out, they've retired, they've moved to other communities, and the cost of living has allowed people to move, and transportation has allowed them to move to other communities. My point being, Ali, is we are a wonderfully diverse town. In less than 800 of the 50,000 people who live here actually work at the East Hartford plant. So it's a very, very different community in 2021 as we move into 2022. Wonderfully diverse compared to, we'll call it the solidly blue class manufacturing community it was through the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Okay, interesting to know. And anything else you want to mention? Actually, I did have one final question. Are you facing any labor shortages at Town Hall? I know we've been talking to a lot of businesses. That is a big thing, other than the supply chain issue, is finding the workers. But internally, how is it going at Town Hall? Do you guys have a lot of open positions?
So Town Hall and Board of Education are two separate entities. We have about 500 employees at the town, about 1,300 at the Board of Ed. We both face our challenges. Right now, as I sit here on November 30th, wishing everybody a happy holiday, whatever holiday it is they celebrate in the month of December. I will tell you that I have an open finance director position, I have an open human resources director position, and I have an open fire chief position. So that advertisement went out in the local papers. We're looking to recruit for that. So I'll put a pitch in for that. But the answer is yes. There is, I think we've all read stories about the great COVID walkout. Some people who left their offices out of an abundance of caution simply aren't returning to their offices. For a while, we thought it was the plus up that they were getting, the $600 a week from unemployment. But when that stopped, I believe that stopped in September, maybe even a little earlier, a lot of people still didn't return to the office. So what we're finding is people are looking at a different way to come to work and to do work. So we face the same labor challenges, maybe not as severe as the restaurant industry, but when we can recruit somebody, oftentimes they change their mind and take a different job or continue to stay home. Or if they do show up, they have a different idea as to what the work environment should be. So I would say, yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, it seems like it's not just a private sector issue anymore. Well, thank you so much for coming on the BizCast, and we look forward to speaking to you in a few months and seeing the progress that you make as you start off this new role in East Hartford.
Ali, first off, thank you for having me. Great set of questions. And I just encourage everybody to keep an eye on East Hartford. We're coming.
We will be keeping an eye on you. And thank you for listening to the CBIA BizCast. You can find more episodes on Apple, SoundCloud, YouTube, and CBIA.com.